Right now, a single piece of paper dictates the fate of the entire global economy. Even nations that despise the United States must use its money to survive. This system wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate, engineered outcome. By 1944, the map of Europe was unrecognizable. Entire industrial sectors were reduced to rubble, and centuries-old economies were in freefall. Supply chains were severed, national treasuries were drained, all to fund the war effort. The surviving nations were running out of time, desperately needing a functioning financial mechanism just to keep their citizens from starving. That sheer level of economic desperation created a massive geopolitical void. With the industrialized world devastated, the United States stood untouched by the bombing campaigns and perfectly positioned to dictate the terms of the recovery. Before the bombs fell, global money followed a strict physical limitation. Countries tied the value of their currencies directly to the amount of actual physical gold sitting inside their vaults. Because there is a finite amount of gold in the earth, no single government could artificially inflate their wealth or force other nations to bend to their domestic monetary policy. It was a decentralized balance of power. But the staggering cost of global warfare shattered that equilibrium. Bankrupt nations abandoned their gold pegs just to fund their militaries. For America to build its financial empire, the old system had to be dismantled. In the summer of 1944, delegates from 44 nations traveled to a hotel in rural New Hampshire. They were there to establish the framework that would replace the broken gold standard. The agreement they signed restructured the global economy into a hub-and-spoke model. Instead of relying on their own gold reserves, allied and developing nations tethered their individual currencies directly to the United States dollar. To convince these nations to agree, the U.S. offered a specific guarantee. The delegates were promised that the dollar itself would remain backed by physical metal, locked at a fixed exchange rate of $35 per ounce of gold. By anchoring the system to gold, the United States established a veneer of absolute safety, effectively consolidating the world's financial trust into American vaults. The United States could make that bold promise for one specific reason. By the end of the war, America had accumulated nearly 70. If France wanted to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they paid for it in U.S. currency. The convenience of paper rewired global market behavior. The world unlearned its reliance on physical metal, replacing the foundation of international wealth with a currency controlled by a single government. Then, in 1971, the underlying mathematics of the agreement began to fail. Facing mounting domestic inflation and a drain on its gold reserves, President Richard Nixon made a unilateral executive decision. He completely severed the dollar's convertibility into gold. Overnight, the promise that built the Bretton Woods system was erased. The dollar became pure paper money, backed by nothing but the credit of the U.S. government. Stripping away the intrinsic value of the world's reserve currency should have triggered a catastrophic run on the banks. It should have sent foreign governments scrambling to dump their dollar holdings immediately. But the panic never came.
The dollar didn't crash. It absorbed the shock entirely. The international community realized too late that they weren't relying on the dollar because it was backed by gold. They were relying on it because they had no alternative. Today, we are living inside the absolute outcome of that trap. More than 80% of all global trade is still priced and settled entirely in U.S. dollars. Every major international banking corridor, every commodities exchange, and the daily physical movement of raw materials relies on a plumbing system that requires American currency to function. The dependency is so deeply entrenched that even adversarial states with openly hostile policies toward Washington are forced to maintain massive dollar reserves just to participate in the modern world. The architecture of the system itself has become a form of inescapable control. Subscribe to Ivanti Docs for Part 2, where we uncover how this financial monopoly is weaponized today.